Hello, everybody. My name is Tori Hathaway, and thank you so much for joining us this evening for our Women in the Music Industry panel. I am so thrilled and excited to be surrounded by so many incredible and inspiring females who are pushing the music industry forward. We have such a broad um, broad amount of knowledge here tonight, and I'm so excited to talk about it. I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Jane Aurora, who is a producer, musician, and mix engineer. She owns Capsule Studios, the presenter of the Producers Lounge series, which takes place in studios and at events throughout British Columbia. The Producers Lounge Vancouver was founded as an initiative to elevate female and non-binary identifying music producers and underrepresented producers and composers of all genders. Jane's music production credits encompass internationally acclaimed artists from Australia and North America in multiple genres. Jane is the founder of Arrival Studios, a Vancouver-based music licensing company that represents 50-plus diverse touring artists and composers for Sync. Thank you so much for joining us, Jane.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
We also have Carleigh Aikins, who is a multidisciplinary artist, and her career spans over 2 decades. As a vocalist, she's played world stages from Royal Albert Hall to the Ryman Auditorium, Red Rocks Amphitheater to Massey Hall, and everywhere in between. As a visual artist, her whimsical paintings have been displayed as public art in her hometown of Barrie, Ontario, and in collectors' homes from Ontario to Colorado. As a theater artist, she's been a leading lady, designer, stage manager, mentor, and education programmer. Currently splitting her time between Toronto and Montreal, she can also be found traversing the globe from London to Los Angeles and everywhere in between as she pursues her career in the arts. Thank you so much, Carleigh, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tori.
As well, we also have somebody who is near and dear to my heart, Bronwin Parks. Award-nominated Feisty Creative is the design studio of creative director Bronwin Parks. Working with all of Canada's major labels and formerly as senior designer at Universal Music Canada, Parks brings her comprehensive design and marketing skills to every project. She believes her immersive approach to design for music creates an authentic, visual, unique style to each artist and the music it represents. Pairing her passion for music with a love of design, Bronwin helps artists and industry create unique brand narratives that thrive both online and in print. With over 16 years' experience developing outstanding design, Parks' past collaborations include some of Canada's biggest stars, most notably Jan Arden, Johnny Reid, Serena Ryder, Blue Rodeo, Gord Bamford, Paul Brandt, Kinney Starr, Kira Isabella, and the Washboard Union. Her career began in Toronto and has taken her to campuses and conferences across the country to speak as an ambassador for great design. Thanks, Bronwin, for joining us this evening.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We also have Julia Train, whose history in the Canadian music industry began with her training in classical piano and love of music. She attended the Harris Institute for the Arts, where she studied recorded arts management. Shortly after graduating, she went to work for CMRRA Royalties Administration Department. Julia was a valued member of the Factor team from 2008 to 2011 as a submissions coordinator and communications manager. She also held a position as the senior manager, communications and outreach at the Musicians' Rights Organization Canada, MROC, ensuring that musicians receive the recompensate that they are entitled. Currently, Julia is working with Gypsy Soul Records. She is also on the board of Women in Music Canada on the Program Advisory Committee for Centennial College and part of the Code of Conduct and Anti-Harassment Committee. Thank you so much, Julia. And thank you for joining us on short notice. She just got off a plane from Banff, so thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and I have a dog that's missed me for a week, so there might be, we might have an extra visitor here.
And lastly on our panel, we have Terry Brown, who is a specialist in the entertainment marketing, sponsorship and branding, talent buying, and event marketing industries, and has worked extensively as a promoter. Her company, TBA Network Inc., worked with Hallmark to transform their annual holiday CD program into a multi-million-dollar music distribution business, resulting in 2 platinum and 5 gold RIAA certified albums. She's worked with the likes of the Beatles, Katie Lang, Reba McEntire, The Who, James Taylor, Dolly Parton, just to name a few. Her artist management credits currently sit with Jessie LaBelle, Billy Dean, the Everly Brothers, John Schneider, Lacey J. Dalton, Merle Haggard, and Peter Cetera. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I can't convey how thrilled I am to have you here. So we have some questions that we've already received from our emerging artists and from the general public. And I saw this question, it caught my eye right as we were starting our live stream, and I wanted to jump right in to some of the nitty-gritty stuff. So Julia, I'll start off with you for this question, and we'll kind of pass it around. What are some unexpected hurdles you've had to jump through in your industry, either related to being a female or just in the industry in general?
Well, of course, as you know, anyone that works in the industry, you know, it's not a 9-to-5 job. I mean, you're working all the time, and finding like that balance as being a mother, and balancing your home life, because, you know, for me, I was on the road all the time. And at one point it was, I was traveling 9 months out of 12 months of the year, raising 2 little kids by myself and things like that. So I think that a hurdle for me was just finding that life balance, and also finding support. And that's, you know, something that, you know, with our board now, we're trying to find and help out. It's tough to do that, to have a work balance and a thing, because, you know, you're in the office all day and probably at a show, or, you know, you have a deadline and you're in the studio, you have to get these things done, because otherwise you're just not going to get paid. So that's just my experience.
And what about you, Bronwin?
Well, being in what I like to call kind of like a soft trade, like women, there are a lot of women designers. It's actually about a 50-50 split. For me, the challenge I found is getting into those higher levels, and really just having to kind of convince clients that, you know, an art director can also be a woman, a creative director can be a woman, and also getting, you know, sort of taking on those more authoritative roles, and I've noticed that with some of my clients too, especially the female clients looking to take more control over their careers and that type of thing. There seems to be that barrier when building teams and stuff like that to having a girl boss, I guess. So a lot of times it's, you know, perseverance. But again, much like Julia mentioned, sort of work-life balance becomes a very big challenge. So there's a bunch, but they're not insurmountable.
And what about you, Jane, as a producer? I'm sure you have slightly different experiences in a very male-dominated area.
Yeah, well, you know, becoming a producer is something that evolved over time. I was a performing artist for years first, and did a lot of workshop facilitation, touring and traveling. And ultimately, whether you're male, female, or non-binary, becoming a producer involves an understanding of many different aspects of the industry. But there are very few women and non-binary folks that are producers at this stage. I say the statistic is less than 5% in Canada. And I'm lucky to be in Vancouver, in a great arts community that does have a lot of amazing feminists, and feel very supported in my work. But certainly coming through, you know, working in Melbourne, working in Europe, working in India a lot, there was definitely a lot of gender bias to get there. And at this later stage of my career, I'm 38 now, I don't have any issues with letting people know if I don't think they're, you know, behaving appropriately or treating me with respect in a situation. But I guess ultimately the interesting thing is, to be a producer, you need to be respected by the artist, musician, the engineer, many people around you. And it really is a changing world where we're seeing more and more women step into these roles with the support of arts industries in countries like Canada, but it's still considered quite unusual. But it's an important time for us to really foster that development for young women and non-binary folks, which is what we've been doing in Producers Lounge. So talking about all of the skills that are required in order to be in that role of decision making, where you can encourage and inspire an artist to convey something in a particular way, to be true to themselves, as well as hold enough technical skills to confidently boss around engineers, you know, in the studio, which isn't a very traditional women's role. It's a commonly like the guy's domain. I mean, even studios are predominantly owned by men across the country. You've got less than 5% studio ownership for women as well. So I guess some of those steps that need to be taken to enhance and create more opportunities for the future is for women and non-binary folks to have access to those spaces so that they can play creatively, experiment without fear of being judged. And that's something that I'm doing in Producers Lounge in Vancouver. Not something that I was lucky enough to grow up with always, although I did have a lot of great male mentors in my life that got me to where I am. I've never had any female mentors as a producer. So I'm now doing that for a younger generation, and it's exciting to see more and more women and non-binary folks stepping into that role, because it's difficult to model yourself on something that you've never seen before. But it's an exciting time where change is certainly happening.
That is so exciting. And you talk about times changing. Obviously, not only right now, but especially over the past 20 years, the music industry has changed so significantly and had to adapt to so many different things, from streaming services becoming a thing to females also developing a presence in the industry, a notable presence that makes it an impact. And I am really interested, Terry, on how you can elaborate, because you mentioned to me earlier that you have been a pillar in the music industry for quite a while now. Even being around and promoting the Beatles in the 60s, when they were first coming to America for their shows. So you've seen a lot of growth and change in the industry, and I'm really interested to hear what some of your stories are of how the perspective has changed over time.
Well, it certainly has changed over time. When I started in the industry, I started working for $1 an hour, and worked for a record promoter who introduced me to all these disc jockeys who needed people to supply talent to them. And I wanted more money than $1 an hour. So it just, evolved, and they became, in their own right. I mean, they became significant to the industry when television evolved. And it was a very interesting time. I lived in LA during the 60s, where you still see the large concert grocers of today had been established there. The Eagles were playing at the Troubadour, and there was music all around. It was really wonderful. I think for me, I was at the right place at the right time with the right people. And it wasn't necessary that I had mentors. I did, but I think more I had people that relied on me to get the job done. And that was exciting for me. And ultimately it grew into, I became an agent before I could get into nightclubs. I was 19 years old. Lots of things happen. Now women have to work harder. I think that they need to support each other. And I see that down here in Nashville. I'm watching Leslie Fram, who started Change the Conversation on the radio and internally. And she's the senior vice president at CMT, and she has gotten 50% play of women on her station, on her TV station. And she also has women being placed in good corporate positions, and brought such power to that you're seeing a woman head of a major label, and Cindy Mabe, who's running Capitol. So, and these women are deserving. But I had a mentor, and a man named Jimmy Bowen, who ran all 5 major labels down here in Nashville at one time. And at one point, I listened to an interview that he had. He was a friend for a long time, and he watched me, and a lot of times, struggle through things. And when he gave the interview, he said, they asked him, how come you have 13 women department heads? And he answered, because they work harder. And that was as simple as it was to him. And they cared more. And I think that's true, because we, as just in general, are more caring. And that facade that you have to fight with men all the time, I find that hard. I know that I embrace my male friends as much as I embrace my female friends. And I hate that it has to be divided by gender, but I've watched the change. And if it hadn't been, I don't know how many women would have succeeded in the places they've gotten.
I have something to add also that in my experience was that usually when I was starting out in the music business, I had to start at smaller jobs. I just found that the males, because I worked for funding organizations and things like that, where you served at the pleasure of the board at that time, and it's kind of the guys in the industry kind of got in a lot to better positions. So you had to really build yourself up because to get to, like I did, to senior levels in organizations.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, I didn't experience it that. And I know that sounds strange. At one point, people kept saying to me, I need to write a book. And I gathered a bunch of women together because I didn't think I wanted to write the whole book. And they were women of the 60s. And we called ourselves the first ladies of rock and roll.
Nice.
And we never got it written. There was 20 of us at the table, but none of us got it. Was fun. None of us were standing up and saying, okay, this is how we'll do it. But women in LA, particularly at the time, they were needed because the men were not going to do the footwork. And I was out on the street, I was watching talent, I was doing all of that. And like I said, I was an agent. When I said I was an agent, I was an agent to the Dave Clark Five. And then I got hired into Decca Records as head of A&R. And I brought the Who to Monterey. But all of those things were new exploring things, and nobody said, you did that or whatever. It was just a case of it. I fell into those jobs because I was on the street and I could identify talent, and it was a change of the music shift to the older genre. So they embraced that. I think that's happening now. Look, I'm in the middle of trying to figure out streaming like everybody else, and it's not easy. And you bring old thoughts to a new business and you're going, okay, you have to release all of this music, you're releasing all of these copyrights. I'm so against that because you're going to lose a lot of songs along the way. And my father was a music publisher, so I'm sitting there saying, why do you want to do this? And yet the more you release, the more chance you have. And in particular in country music, I have not seen anybody, with the exception of maybe Kane Brown, that has been able to garner an audience big enough to get a hit record. They need the record companies, they need radio. So we're kind of caught in, and I like this format, I've been in it a long time. We're caught in the middle of okay, do we go to streaming? Do we not go to streaming? The record company is saying you have to have 5 million streams for us to sign you. Well, how do you get there? And why would you, if you had 500 million streams, why would you economically need them? Well, you need them to go to radio because radio still dominates down here.
Right.
It's very difficult.
The changes are so drastic and so fast to adjust to, and in this new industry that we're functioning within, we received a question about what advice you would give to young independent female artists who are learning how to navigate this new industry where the rules don't count anymore. Carleigh, would you mind speaking to that?
Oh, well, I don't know if I'm the expert at that because I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean, I think when I started out in music as a 20-year-old, we were still using MySpace at that time, and like Facebook wasn't even a thing even yet. So I have watched the rapid, transition, and with each year seeing how things transform. And it's if anything, you have to be really adaptable in this industry because it's constantly changing. And yeah, I mean, being in a band in the States the last I haven't been in that band, which is called Paper Bird, which is based in Colorado, for the last couple of years. But we were facing a lot of those things that Terry was touching on, like okay, we need to get into radio, but in order to have an American radio campaign, you need so much money to even begin to scratch the surface of that, and you have to build all these relationships with the different stations. You have to have a good radio rep. So like trying to, and going to the AAA conferences and trying to build those relationships, but it's really, really difficult. And driving across the country and stopping at every radio station you can to try and build these relationships, and you still just like, we're really not getting anywhere. How, and we had actually label representation in Nashville with 30 Tigers, but that was more of like a distro marketing deal. They weren't exactly, we were supported in some ways, but in a lot of ways it was like, we're kind of out here on our own. That being said, we still, had control over our masters and whatnot. But yeah, it's just a learning curve constantly. And now with everyone being at home, and things being shuttered, now it's a whole new way of like trying to figure out how to reach your audiences without being out there on the road. So it's like right now we're seeing a huge shift in how we're going to manage, really connecting with audiences. So I mean, I know that's not really a solution. I'm just relating to how it has been. It's a learning curve constantly, and that's why. Go on, Terry. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it reminds me of music in the 60s. I mean, think about it. That frontier where they were all playing live, and they had to be in a major city to be discovered, and then they would do grassroots stuff and they would be discovered. And I can tell you numerous stories about that. This is a new frontier. I think you're lucky to be in it, because I think now women are getting a better position just based on the fight they've put up. And I do think that, music will this will find its way. It's going to take a while, because what you're saying is absolutely true. And you touched on something that I didn't touch on, which is to get to radio, it's expensive. And yet it's still necessary to bring home that mass appeal. And I think that will never change, especially when radio is only playing 24 new records, 24 records off the charts. And oftentimes they're all artists that have been established 10 years ago and have new singles, and there's like room for one more person or one more record to get play. It's hard. It's tough.
I'd like to speak to a few possibilities here in the new frontier a little bit, because I don't work with any artists that are signed at present, but I've made a couple of different records that have had over 1 million streams, not 5 million, but independently made records by artists from Australia. Not being part of the North American scene initially is a setback. Everyone that's grounded in beginning here has a little bit of a leg up in terms of engaging with radio, college radio, all of the things that here. So Australian artists have to try a little bit harder, but you can see from the successes of people like Sia and Gautier and Tame Impala, artists like that they can even rise from a distant continent, which is even more distant now in COVID times. But ultimately, I think it's more of an exciting time for coming up in the world than ever if you have a good understanding of what you can do with a digital platform. And some young artists that I work with that have managed their Spotify accounts and their YouTube very well and made a great deal of content and grown an audience, some of them before they've even left home, that have millions of followers, are in a great position. And as a result of having spent time on that, they are able to attract much higher live performance fees because their following's large. So when they're approaching, or their agency is approaching a festival, they do look at the numbers now on all of these platforms. And it is possible to grow that reach organically if you're mindful, if you can corner a market, if you can know who's interested in your music and how to engage with it. One particular young artist I've worked with a bunch is called Talara from Australia. She's had over 1 million listens to a song because we got playlisted the first song above Michael Kiwanuka on a Coffee and Chill playlist. And for her, that resulted in nearly a quadrupling of all of her festival fees and a huge amount of interest. And things that you should know are, if you're going to put stuff in Spotify, let it sit there for 35 days. So the music department reviews it and decides whether to playlist it or not. There's some very tangible things that you can do at a grassroots level to make sure that you get discovered or don't miss out on these opportunities. It can come down to the number of days that your song is uploaded for. And don't underestimate the power of developing a huge YouTube audience from doing a cover of something interesting, tagging it in an interesting way. This stuff was never available in the 90s when my band was touring. It was much more of a grassroots, city to city thing. But now, even in these COVID times, from your home, if you are identifying patterns in the people that are following and engaging with you, you can actually grow millions of followers from your home. And that was never possible before.
I totally agree with you. I think that is the assets you have now are much easier to harness. It just requires you to be more than just a musician on the road or be an artist on the road. It requires you to really engage in social media, and I think that puts a lot of stress on artists, and I think that's a little bit difficult. And quite frankly, I think that when you're talking about your your in-person fees, I think you'll find that the now we have no in-person fees basically, and it's probably going to be that way for another year. And that was what was sustaining those young new artists who could get out there and at least play club dates and do something. There is nothing there now. And I don't know how they're going to sustain, but I think you really hit on something. I really think if they engage and they do it properly, I'm a marketing person, I'm finding it very interesting how you can do that.
I can jump in here and help a little bit. So I do a lot of creative direction and brand consulting and that type of thing. And I think for young artists today, the most important part is to figure out who you are as an artist. What do you stand for? What are the things you really care about? Because the things you care about are also the things your core fan base is going to care about. One of the first things I always say to anybody when they ask me to go over sometimes their factor applications or other situations where they're putting information out there, who is your target audience? And the amount of times that I get like boys, girls, age 12 to 65 all around the world, listen, I love you. The world does not love you. The whole world will never love you. The whole world doesn't love Taylor Swift. Like, 24 million people did yesterday, but that is rare. And most importantly, once you figure that out, you will start to figure out how to target your online advertising through your social media feeds. You'll know exactly who to hit because you know what they like, because you know what you like. And those are the things you're able to talk about as an expert because they're things you're passionate about already. And then from there, you can start to work up to things like brand partnerships, which is a slightly bigger deal. But those, as you get your followers up, as Jane was talking about, not only can you increase your, yeah, we don't have live appearance fees and you're not doing shows, but you know what people are doing right now? They're posting all kinds of things. It's like, try Coors Banquet beer, hashtag ad. Like, that's an easy $5,000, right? And so if obviously some of you, the Coors Banquet thing is a little above age, but there are other things. There's lots and lots of youth targeted companies that are looking for brand ambassadors. And if you, as an artist, and as you gain a larger and larger following, those are areas and revenue streams you're going to be able to capitalize on that you can then tie into your music. And I'm not saying in your music video, you literally name drop whatever, YTV or something, but you can maybe include Aquafina water bottles in your music video or in your online videos, your cover videos, doing a cover of a really popular song and really making it your own. Don't just cover it and do your best Taylor Swift impression. Cover it, make it yours. And that is what's going to get the attention of not only potential fans of yours, but it could potentially get the attention of Taylor Swift. A client of mine did a cover of a Dixie Chicks song about 5 years ago, and she just did it as a joke. And she did it, it was a song that she made up called Not Ready to Scrape Ice, because she woke up and it was freezing cold and she just felt like it was too early for winter in Canada. And she got her then fiance, now husband, to video her scraping the ice off the front of her car in PEI. And then she recorded the whole song that she's not ready to scrape ice. And the Dixie Chicks retweeted her and made a huge comment that she got play on global TV. She got interviewed by CBC, and like it totally went viral in the period of 48 hours. So these little things you can do incrementally, even from your house, to build your following. And that doesn't even necessarily involve like hiring creative types like myself. And it might mean that you want to play around with a few different things, start learning some of these platforms, because even if you get a rudimentary knowledge of video production and editing and just messing about with it at this stage, it's going to help you later as you begin to hire professionals to do this, because you can speak their language and you're able to get a more efficient sort of process going, and then the product's going to be that much better. So there's all kinds of things you can get started at a real beginner level. You don't need to be necessarily a heavily touring artist to do this. It's actually really good to get started as soon as you decide I want to be a public performing artist. Then you can get started right now.
And I love that you touched on like introducing people as well. And I would love to talk about each of your experiences and your thoughts on how an artist can build an appropriate team of allies and supporters and people to guide them along the way in the industry. And I'd love to know what all of your thoughts are on how to find the right people and when it's the right time to start looking, things to look for that are good, things that are bad, and your experiences in building a team in the industry.
I'll jump on it. Oh, I started to finish talking, so I'll do it again. Well, first, I mean, it's a little harder now because we're not really getting out and there's a whole social distancing thing. But I would say, like, look at artists that that you're sort of on the same level as you. They maybe are not the exact same genre, but maybe they're a similar genre. Because a lot of industry professionals, some of them specialize in certain genres, some of them don't. Some of them work for anybody. I kind of work for anybody, but I seem to be a real favorite in like country roots music, which is cool because I dig it. But look who other people work with, and referrals are always great. I have a tendency when I'm out networking with people, I try not to judge people like right off the top, because somebody could be having a bad day. I've been there. I've been networking with a level 5 migraine, and I can tell you I had resting bitch face the whole day. And so I might not have been the most approachable person that day, but I try and judge people by who they keep around them. Right. And so if I've met a few industry types where it's like, okay, they seem okay, but then I notice that they're associated with some people who I've heard some kind of shady things about.
Right.
And keep your ears peeled. This industry can be a little, cliquey, and there's a lot of backroom talk. And sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's jealousy, professional jealousy or otherwise, which happens a lot. Sometimes it's just actually the truth. And that's sad but true. If I have a 3 strikes rule personally, so it's sort of if more than 3 people say exactly the same thing unprompted, then I'm likely to not recommend or refer that professional person. And so I always recommend to my clients too, like, just be objective when you're looking for your team. And when in doubt, also look at the credits on the records that you love. Like, if you love a particular album and you're looking for a producer, look on the back of that record, and don't be afraid to call them. Don't just assume that somebody is out of your league just because they recorded a certain big star. But also make sure that the vibe is right. And I found that a lot of artists they kind of create these like musical families. And through that, it creates a camaraderie. It creates sort of a safe space for you all to have conversations. I know this became really important for especially female artists during the Me Too movement. A lot of these sort of families started to really like close ranks in a good way, though, to protect some of the women who were more vulnerable and in the industry. So I think that it's important to make sure that you sort of surround yourself with a group of allies that also aren't afraid to call you on those times when you might be full of yourself a little bit, because you don't need yes men. for sure. You want people that are willing to offer you constructive criticism throughout the process of your career.
That's great advice. And I'm going to add one thing. Make sure anybody on your team has passion, wants to be your cheerleader, and takes it as far as they can possibly take it. Because a lot of times people will sign multitude of artists and then see what sticks, throw it up against the wall and see what sticks, not really loving what they're doing. I only manage people that I care about, that I like their music, that I want that to be heard by the masses. And I think that you're right. You should call people, you should reach out, but if you don't find that they are in sync with you or don't have the same career path in mind as you do, then I definitely think you should not have them on your team.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think what Bronwin was saying before, most importantly, is to first really be solid with who you want to be as an artist and really be strong in those notions, so that you can then go out and align yourself with people who get you and get what you want to do. I've worked with managers before where I'm like, I don't even think you really like the music we're making, and it didn't really feel like they were passionate about that. They were just like going through the motions of what, like, these are the steps to take, and we'll see what catches. But it's like, if the person working for you, you can sense that they're not really getting who you are or getting what you're trying to put forward, then it's like red flag. And that seems like a really basic thing, but it's easy to get involved with people who can, not trick you, but talk a big talk and say, like, we'll do X, Y, and Z to get you here. And then you realize ultimately it's like, I don't really feel we're resonating, like, that you even understand who I am as an artist. So that's, if you know that within yourself and you're very clear about that, then you can align yourself with people where you can trust your intuition, and you can tell if they're getting what you're putting down. So that's like the first stage before you go out and try to find a crew that can back you up and support you and call you on your stuff and give you constructive criticism, because they really understand you as an artist. But you have to understand yourself first. If you're wishy-washy, then everyone else around you can't help you, because you aren't clear on your vision.
And I just want to add one thing that I always advocate, and also, with our artists on Gypsy Soul, and if we bring anyone on, is education. Like, we're pretty lucky. We have so many trade organizations, and there's such a great outlet to you have to learn about what your rights are. I'm a big advocate of that, and also being part of, like, whether it's advocacy or anything, before you start building that team. And it kind of ties into what Bronwin says, that whether it's SEMA or CARIS or something, like, be present and participate and learn, because I mean, just like we're doing today, there's so much education. And through that, when you do listen to these panels and things like that, it gives you opportunities to network and figure that out. But yeah, that would be mine, is just be present and join, like, these trade organizations, whether it's your provincial one, whether it's in the city or whatever, and start showing up. Because the other thing is, you have to empower yourself and know, like, whether, one of my artists works, like, she knows absolutely everything, whether it's metadata to publishing to all those things. So I think another thing is educate yourself and know, because, you don't want someone to control or dictate or anything like that.
That's really good advice, because I found a lot of artists who really say, all I want to do is write songs and record them and be on the road, and I don't want to know. And then what if you go away and then they don't know anything about their business? They have no idea what's going on. Education is so important. And look, when I was doing this early on, there was no education. You were learning. Everybody was learning as they went. Now there's millions of books on the subject. On everything, on publishing, on recording, on what managers should do, on performance. I have a friend that is a performance coach, and he's written a book all on that. There's so many things you can learn and should It's your business, and it is a business.
Jane, I'd love to know your thoughts on this as well.
I certainly agree that finding a really good team and cheerleaders that think you're incredible is ideal. You know, in the studio when you're creating content as well as live performance coaching, and you have to want it really bad for it to work out. I'm going to say that's absolutely true. You know, since I started my career, I've been a performing artist, a bass player, a drummer, a recording artist, a workshop presenter. There's many different roles that you can take on within this industry to learn things within the industry, but ultimately having a passionate commitment to creatively engaging with people on an ongoing basis is the only thing that's going to float a lifelong career for you. And I agree that finding a management team and so on is ideal, but only if you're ready and or those people are experienced. Some indie artists will have indie labels seeking them that have less experience than the artists themselves, that might actually inhibit their ability to connect with their but I think something that came to mind while Bronwin was speaking earlier, well, and in these COVID times while everyone is at home, is a little anecdote from an artist I'm working with at the moment, who's a 19-year-old guy called Kid in PJs. And he's making beats, incredible beats, all on his iPad. He brings them into my studio. I run him through all of the killer gear and fatten up the beats, and he sings, an incredible singer. But he started manufacturing these beats at such a quality that he started DMing artists that he likes and peddling his beats. And a lot of really famous artists are bored and sitting at home because their tours are off right now. So it's perhaps a better time than ever for you to approach a well-known star that you might like to notice your material, and the equivalent of a support slot now as a repost of something you've created. You know, if it's something creative like a cover song or a YouTube video of you, you know, doing one of their pieces. But, you know, in Tasia's case, and PJ started to sell beats to some of the artists that he hopes to one day tour with, just from being gutsy enough to pursue that and to send them private messages to their Instagram. Because we're in a whole new world compared to the 60s. Everyone had a gatekeeper. Everyone had someone awesome like Terry there to make sure, you know, they could control what was coming in and out. And now it's the era of authenticity, and you're seen as a bit of an idiot if you don't manage social media. It's pretty obvious that it's inauthentic if that's the case. So if you're aware that your favorite artist is in fact driving their own social media, they're probably taking a scroll through those messages, or them and their personal assistant is. And if you've done something incredible that highlights some of their work that's going to make them look more interesting to a youth market, then it's highly likely that they will engage with you. But I would say don't do this preemptively before you create something awesome, or it's going to backfire. So know the quality of your work and what you're presenting before you make that approach. But if you're just really sure that someone's going to love what you do and it relates to their work, I'd say now is a better time than ever, because everyone that's usually on the road is in their lounge rooms doing what we're doing right now.
I have another question here from an emerging artist. There are many artists around the world wanting to make it into the music business. What is a way to make the best first impression possible and ensure that you're consistently standing out amongst the crowd? I'll throw that to Julia.
Oh, wow. Geez, I don't know if I'm the right person to say that. I mean, I think it's always understanding who you're talking to, and I'll go back to the whole thing is understanding who you're talking to and what you want for them. And I mean, be professional and have your, you know, to stand out. It's tough, but I mean, you have to be consistent. I know we do that with our artists. Yeah, you have to be consistent. You have to be present, and you know, and you know, be sure that you have, you know, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I would just say that, you know, whether it's you schedule your social media, so you're keeping and being consistent, engaging with, you know, even if you only have 300 people that are watching your videos, that, you know, if they are commenting back, that you're present. Yeah, that's about it. And then, like, again, yeah. That one stumped me a bit.
I got something on that.
Let me just say,
like, we're working
Terry.
on it every day, whether it's radio campaigns, whether it's, you know, a Facebook live feed, whether, you know, back in the day it was putting merch together. And in terms of any artist, just play. Like the other thing is you really have to develop your art and you have to, but this is also a business. So I think that also if you want to make a great impression, you have to know who you're talking to, understand, like look them up, creep them a little bit if you're going to engage with them so you know what they do and how they can help you. So, you just, yeah, that's
You know what? My favorite saying, and I always say this to artists, and especially those that don't want to put time and effort into, they think they've got it down, they're performing right, all of those things. You only have one time to make a first impression. That's it. And that will stick with you no matter how good you are. So if you're having an off day, call in sick and do it again, reschedule it, because
Mhm.
that is a saying to live by. And I've seen it work time and time again. There's an artist here named Garth Brooks who was turned down by every single record label in this town, and he was playing at the Bluebird as a like a headline act. Well, the Bluebird only holds 100 people, so it's not a big deal. But he was playing, and this is way before Nashville, and it was that really popular venue. It was really more of an industry venue. But he got a call from the guy who was supposed to, I'm sorry, he was opening for this guy who was supposed to headline. And he went on, and it happened that one of the record company executives was in the audience that had seen him before. But obviously, Garth wasn't on the first time because he turned to Garth's manager. This is a famous story. And he said to him, "Now, why did we pass on him? Can you come in the office in the morning?" And hence his Capitol Records deal took place. So again, always try to be on, and one time to make a first impression.
Mhm.
Jane, I noticed you were going to add something as well.
Well, it's just further to what Terry and Julia said, but ultimately making sure you're completely authentic with what you're doing, because people can see through that so quickly if that's not
Yeah.
the case. Being
Truly,
authentic,
yeah.
but also knowing what's special about you. I'm going to quote Sylvia Massey, who I've been lucky enough to collaborate with lately for Producers Lounge. For those of you who don't know, she's produced everyone from Prince to the Red Hot Chili Peppers to Tool to Johnny Cash. She's been there since the 90s. She's the biggest female producer of all time. And she said to me, you got to know what your shtick is. You got to know what it is, what that thing is that's special about you, that's going to make someone remember you. Be sure about what it is that you're presenting that makes you special. It's going to make you stand out, and authentically present that in that ideal moment where you've got those important eyes on you. Yeah.
Bronwin, I was lucky enough to have you as a part of my team when I was working on my last project, and we were talking before about being authentic. I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the strategies that you use when you're consulting with artists to kind of pull out what is authentic to them when they're not even sure what that is when you're first doing a consult. How do you support them in that process of discovery?
Well, I have a series of questions that some are easier to answer and some are a little less easy. You can usually start out with some softballs like, what is your favorite color and what is your least favorite color, right? And like, and then you sort of build from there. Like, you want to figure out what, like Jane said and Terry said, like, you are the best you, right? And we don't need another Taylor Swift. We have a Taylor Swift and she's pretty spectacular. We don't need another Iggy Pop. He's amazing. Like, let's leave him where he is. Like, you can, be inspired by artists and, pull inspiration from their music and their aesthetic, but it's really about figuring out that perfect mix that makes you the artist that you are. And that's going to sort of come out in your music too. Like, what are the things you stand up for? What are the things that you hold as core values as just a human being? It's sort of like I was saying at the beginning. Like, once you figure out those pieces, that's going to put you in sort of this nice little I hate to say box because I don't want to put anybody in a box, but like, it sort of starts to build the foundation for you as an artist. It's like, no, this is the type of house I want to be, right? Like, am I and this will depend on the genre too. Like some genres encourage sort of luxe and fancy cars and big houses, and other genres are actually the opposite, where it's like the how big is your trailer type of thing. How big are your truck tires? Like that's the important part. And how many rust holes does it have? Like that's like in one genre that's one thing, and the other genre, like your house better be like 10,000 square feet with like 6 Bentleys in the driveway. So figuring out what you hold as important for you is what's going to sort of start the path. And don't be afraid to be a little weird, because like take it from a weirdo, like weirdos stand out. And that is authentic to you. And really, like I've been told women can't do this, women can't do that. I've been told queer people can't do this, and we don't want to see queer people do that. And that's fine, they can think what they want, but don't let that dictate your life. Like see what Jane's doing. Like she hadn't seen a female producer, that didn't stop her from becoming like the epic producer she is today. And most of these women on this panel have not let any of that stop them. And so same for you as an artist. Like let your freak flag fly, man. Like and you look at like Billie Eilish, like she came out of left field and she is the strangest little teenager that looks like she came right out of the 90s. So like that's cool. But
and she did it with her brother. It was just her and her brother.
So it's really important.
Recording in their bedroom.
Right.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah. So it's important to like really think about who you are, and also don't get locked into, I know I said put yourself in a little box, but like don't get locked into a box. If it doesn't fit, don't try and keep it on. Like it's important that you sort of, you're going to mature as an artist. A lot of artists start out one way and then by the end of their career are very different. Like you look at an artist like Elton John, like he started out one way and is now a very different artist than he once was. And he's still amazing, but his career has like found its own path and has like changed paths. It's more like a river, less like a solid mountain, I'd say. So move with it and find the things that fit, because the things that fit will come easier. If you really feel yourself like running up against a wall with something, then maybe it's not the right fit. And sometimes I've seen artists try and jam themselves into a genre that it's like, are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Because I really feel like you might be more this way. And don't be afraid to, as long as it's constructive criticism, like, maybe take some time with it. So I think that as an artist, you're going to grow over time. So don't be locked into anything, but really take the time to look at you, what you like, the things that inspire you, and the things you stand up for. And that's going to help build the authentic artist, public persona that you're going to be putting forward to your audience.
Totally right. Totally right. The other part to that, and I will add this, is when you find something that connects, stay with it, be consistent with it. Don't try to move on to something else too quickly, because that's what Elton did. I mean, he got a couple of hits and then he was able to experiment with his music because he had the control of his career at that point. You've got to stay consistent in the beginning.
Another one, don't lie about socials. Do not lie. Don't buy likes and things like that, because it's unnecessary. I think the other thing is what we always look for is that even if you only have 200 fans, they're true fans. If you all of a sudden have 10,000 followers from nowhere, so just be, I think what Bronwin said, just be authentic, and yeah. But that's a big one for us.
I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about what it feels like to navigate this process as an artist, the obstacles that you ran into, and how you navigated that.
Well, it's been interesting, actually. I mean, I'm a 36-year-old woman, and I've spent the last 10 years, collaborating with a lot of other artists, or as a vocalist for backing up a lot of men. And so it's been it's been an amazing learning experience to kind of be able to just be a hired gun and step back and watch these men, navigate their careers. So I did learn a lot about that. That being said, a lot of the time I was the only like woman on the stage in that case, or the only woman on the team, or so it's been important to connect with other female identifying people that can teach me, but can relate to, I think, like the female process of creation, and the vulnerability that now that I'm approaching this new period where I've been awarded a large government grant, and I have some support to finally make an album that is just me with my name on it. I'm not part of a band. I'm not collaborating with anyone. Well, I am. You're always collaborating with people, but now even at 36, you can still be going through all these motions of like, whoa, who am I? How do I want to present myself? I'm still discovering things about myself and trying to figure out how to represent that in my work. It's an ongoing process of vulnerability, but deep down, you know your core values, and what kind of, I often think about like, what do the young women that I know, who do I want to be for them to look up to? And that's always like an inspiration for me. But it is an ongoing, really vulnerable place to always be putting yourself in, and to be self-examining, to dig deeper, and to become that more authentic self. And when you're a young woman, you're still kind of discovering that, but your art can be a means to your discovery of yourself as well. You might, if you're 21 and you're like, how do I be authentic? I'm still figuring out who I am. You might, it is a long process, and it is obstacles that you hit up against yourself, where you're like doubting yourself, or you feel like you can't get anywhere because of your gender, or there's been lots of obstacles, as like the last band I was in was led by 3 female vocalists who all shared the duties. We were coming up a lot against a lot of like representation at festivals and stuff like that, and we were white women. Let's not even talk about how Black or Indigenous women or women of color are trying to, especially in like the folk scene, it's just a lot of like white guys, and then there'd be another group of like a female-led group, and it was like, well, they get the slot, there's no room for another band that's like that. We already have the female-led, for example, like we were a lot like a band called Joseph, which also had 3 women, and so it was always like, oh, either Joseph gets the festival slot or we do, when it's like, why are there room for all these guys to be up there playing their music, but there's only slots enough for females? So you come up against that, but you're like, you just have to trust and be authentic, and try to stand out, but also smash the patriarchy and try to figure out how to get more representation in those things, which is great that it's being more spoken about now. But yeah, there's all kinds of obstacles, but ultimately mine is with myself, and just really doing the self work to trust that my story is worth hearing, and that I will find that niche of people who connect with it. And it might not be, a million people. It might be that small little group, but if you really authentically want to create, you're not worried about, will everyone like me? You have to just know that what you're sharing is worthy, and that you'll find your little crew of people who connect with you. Yeah.
That's some pretty powerful stuff.
Cool.
Did anybody have anything they wanted to add to that?
Well, I think too, I was just thinking when you were saying all of that, I mean, we're getting off on things that are really tough for women, but I became a big fan of a new female artist called Ingrid Anders, And I don't know if you've heard her, but she's getting played in all genres of music because she's speaking challenges of women. Her record, I about wrecked my car when I heard this song about, and there was a line in the song that said, she's talking to her boyfriend, she's bringing him home to meet her parents, and the song just said, we'll probably have to sleep in separate bedrooms. And I thought, wow, what a powerful thought. Every woman I know has been through this, even at my age, going back to that. It proved well to her. She's getting tremendous acclaim. And I think that you have to consider your music and what you're saying in your music. And she just knocked it out of the park. And then she has another cut on there that was actually streaming better on social media called Ladylike, which is just an entirely diverse thought. But it's a woman's thought about women. And if you're going to be a woman, don't try to sing men's songs.
I have another question here that somebody messaged it to me privately, and it's a rather sensitive question, but I think it's an important one that we need to address, which is in such like the entertainment industry is notorious male dominated, and dealing with sexual harassment and workplace harassment as a female in the industry. Has it significantly impacted your careers as you see it, and also as people entering the music industry, how can you identify these things and shut them down without ruining your reputation?
Well, I sit on a committee of 36 organizations in Canada, and it was an answer to the Me Too movement where ACTRA had put in for actors, whether they're in theater, TV, or film, to implement safe spaces. And also, a lot of what we've been doing is defining what our workspace looks like, and defining like how, whether it's instilling tools, resources, safe spaces, and things like that. So we're working on it. I mean, in terms of my career, I've been really, really lucky that I haven't been discriminated. I really had a lot of great mentors, and I've been treated well. But not to say that it isn't a case, but right now there is a movement where we are going to create something where the industry is asked to sign on to it. And I can actually try if you want to, I don't know, I don't have the link right now, but it's something that everyone is going to sign on to. And it's just defining what, whether it's, a lot of what we do is we're working, our workplaces are in bars where there's alcohol and they're late nights and we're on the road, and just defining what is appropriate and what is this, and also how we're going to proceed, ensuring. So we're also working with the Department of Heritage in Canada here, and a number of organizations in Ottawa that are going to start putting in hotlines, counseling, and even legal services. So, I mean, in terms of, I just think that when you said that, how does it impact, like, the whole thing of like, I think we're also kind of moving into a place where women are talking about these things. They're not afraid to, even sitting on the board with Women in Music Canada, we're starting to talk to one another. We're starting to share. We're starting to point those guys out, and we're not afraid about our reputations if someone is, whether it's female, male, or whatever, not behaving, or being, abusive. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of just defining what our workplace is and what's appropriate and what isn't, is a challenge, but we're getting there.
Does anybody have anything else that they want to speak to for that?
Yeah, I don't know if everyone's aware of. I mean, this is an American thing that's happening right now with Burger Records, which is a record label that has been exposed in the last few weeks. where women on Instagram have just been able to use that platform to express how this whole label has created a toxic male environment for very young girls, for girls under the age of 18 even.
Oh yeah.
And it's like the whole label has collapsed overnight, and all of the artists under that umbrella, you know, are facing a lot of, like, they've got to answer to these young girls. I think it's amazing that women can do that anonymously and do that together on platforms like that. Just where, like, let's share the story, and the more that we speak together about it, the safer we are, you know. And I think people like Jane are amazing because if you can find women where you can work in these, you know, work with producers who, because a male producer role, it's always like, I've always felt like women have to prove themselves so much more to even be able to call themselves a producer, you know, where it's just like this, like, in the end, you'll find a male tastemaker who will tell you how your song should sound. And I wish that I had more access to female producers, you know, growing up and even now. But if you can be in those spaces and be learning, there's a lot of, I know that, like, Maylee Todd, who's an artist, she runs programs to teach females and to teach about how to use, you know, Ableton or programs like that, where we can learn those things at home and make, like, really quality recordings. Now we don't necessarily have to be trying to get into a studio to learn firsthand with males who could take advantage of their power structure. So there's a lot of ways that we as women can learn those things together and remain safe. I'm not saying, like, every man is dangerous, you know, but it's amazing to just keep an eye out for those ways in which women can learn and be safe and be sharing, and you know, not always have to involve a man if we don't feel comfortable doing that.
I also have a kind of related question here. Um, and it's a somewhat specific question, but what are things an all-male band can do to help accommodate a comfortable working relationship and safe space when working with women and non-binary individuals? Why don't we start with you, Jane?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I guess I sort of what context you mean working with, but I get asked this question a lot by, you know, white cis males that ask me to speak on panels like this, of which I'm often the only woman in an all-male panel of producers and so on. And I think there are definitely many, many well-intentioned guys in the industry that we all have, you know, the ability to collaborate and connect with. And it's really important that they have a commitment to each other to not allow any sort of harassment, any sort of negative engagement in those environments. It's a little bit more, I mean, speaking of an all-male band, maybe we've got some guys watching and that's why they're asking. Perhaps choosing purposely to engage with having more female support acts on your tour, or more women as guests on your album, or even to consider working with a female producer for a different perspective on your art is important. I think further to what Carleigh was saying a moment ago, that it's a really important time for us to be creating safe spaces. And that can mean many things, but creating safe spaces together doesn't have to mean an all women and non-binary space. It's creating an environment where there isn't a traditional pecking order or pyramid structure, which is a huge challenge for the music industry, because the tastemakers, the gatekeepers, the label owners have been predominantly men making those choices. Even if you look at songwriting, you've got 20% or so of songs written by women, which means that guys are literally putting the words in women's mouths. So I would say to the guys in that band, if you are going to have a woman guest on your song, let her write her own lyrics. Let her choose what she wants to wear at the gig. Don't impose any socialized ideas of what it's meant to be for the woman to be part of your act. If you really want to embrace and engage with creating better spaces where everyone's playing together, consider having some more women join your band even. And if not, champion some female artists with your power, if you have power. Yeah.
Bronwin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can sort of speak to both ends of things. Like for the male artists, just like Jane was saying, like it's about creating sort of zero tolerance policy for the type of you know, discriminatory or offensive language, and standing up for women in general, not just because they're, you know, your mother's sisters, you know, daughters, whatever. Like they're human beings, and if you wouldn't say that about, like, it's just not cool to say that about people in general, or to speak about people like that in general. So like, let's, you know, you're not in a locker room, so, and even in locker rooms, knock that shit out. You know, like nobody likes it. Nobody's cooler because they managed to punch down the ladder. Like seriously, like create an environment of respect for just other people. And yeah, a lot like Jane was saying, like by inviting more women to be a part of the creative process and to be a part of your tour, your show, your live stream, your YouTube channel, like, you know, collaborations, like some of the biggest hits are collaborative performances. So, you know, that's really important. And then on the other side, for the girls, I mean, it is a business. Unfortunately, there are people who take advantage in this business. And as such, like, be wary of anyone who wants to have a meeting after a party, after a show, anywhere, like, period. I don't even care if it's their office. Say, you know what, come back to my office. It's like, whatever, 1 in the morning. Nobody has meetings at 1 in the morning, okay? Nobody has real business meetings at 1 in the morning. So remember, it's a business. If business people approach you, they should want to engage with you, like if they are serious about it. And they will engage with you during business hours. They'll say, you know what, here's my card. Let's set up a meeting for next week. Like it's not as simple as that. Sometimes the harassment can't follow you there, but like that's like a good first step. And I usually say like travel in packs and that type of thing. Just to, you know, it is an industry that is surrounded by, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, it doesn't have to be that way, and that's more of a cliche than anything. So, um, just remember that you can say no. don't don't be afraid to tell people that you won't do that for whatever reason, because there is nothing in this industry that is worth giving up a piece of yourself like that. So
Amen.
you are worth more than any recording contract or booking agent contract or potential gig at a show. Like, if that's the type of show that they are, like, walk away. There are better gigs out there. I promise you that. And the thing is that person does that to you, they've done it to other people, and there's a likelihood that they have a bit of a reputation for that. So don't think that any threats to, like, you'll never work again in this town, like, sorry, Humphrey Bogart, like, we'll be fine. So yeah, boys, create a safe space, play zero tolerance, and girls, like, yeah, you're worth a lot more than they think you are.
Well, and also just to add on to that as well, in a lot of these events where the, you know, the 1 a.m. meeting is proposed, there are other people around. There are other females around, and it's never a bad idea to walk up to a female and say, I'm in a situation, I need help. Because almost all of the time, if not all of the time,
Well,
there will be somebody there who will take your hand and say, what do you need? No matter what, right? When you say, I'm in danger and I need help, they will help you. We're allies.
There's also, now they're starting in venues that, especially in the ladies' washrooms and everything, if anyone feels as they're being attacked or anything like that, there's code words you can give bartenders. That's something that they're starting to implement with this thing. But the other thing is, for guys working in the industry, there's a lot of, and I hear this over and over, and it's a lot of, like, the sound women that are working in production and in the back thing, and that they're talked down to, and especially musicians, like, oh, are you sure you know how to, set up your gear and stuff like that. So I think that if you do hear something like that, where maybe you're not doing it, but you hear another man putting a woman down, especially if it's a musician that's setting up, or someone that's doing sound or whatever part of production, hold them accountable, like stand up. And because that's a big one that we get at our panels with Women in Music Canada, is it's a huge challenge. So we always tell the guys that come out that you gotta stand up and say, like, you know what, this isn't right, because you know, it's time for everyone to, yeah, just hold them accountable. If you hear it, stand up and say something. If someone's putting a female sound technician down and say, oh, whatever, because, or whatever, it goes both sides, where musicians might talk down to and think they're not capable, stand up. And yeah.
Yeah, it's not enough to just not be sexist. You need to be
Yeah.
anti-sexist. You need to be
Yeah.
anti-sexist if you want to be a hero right now. You are a hero if you're going to call out the other douchebags that are saying this stuff, because that's how we're going to make change happen.
Yeah.
So I have a slightly lighter question that has been approached that I would like to, I would kind of like to go around and ask everybody. In your respective fields, be that songwriting or production, or as a creative, or as a label representative or a promoter, I just lost it here. Hang on. What are the three most important things to remember when you're approaching somebody as an artist? What are like the three things that are most important to you when you're approached by an artist in your respective craft? Why don't we start with you, Carleigh?
Sorry, so your question is, what are the most important things, like if I'm approaching someone I want to work with, or?
Oh, I would say if somebody was approaching you. So, as a songwriter or an artist for collaboration, what are the three most important things that you would be looking for?
Well, usually, if someone, I get asked a lot to collaborate and come in and sing on people's records, and that can be a way to make passive income doing that. So sometimes it's like, I'll take whatever job comes to me because right now I need the work. But most of the time, you try to, of course, first assess what that person, you go and you creep on them a little bit. You see how they present themselves publicly, maybe what they stand for, what they're saying in their songs. Do you like the music that they're producing? Because at first, like when you're younger, it's good to gain as much experience as you can, and then as you gain that experience, you can begin to curate or to stream who you're collaborating with and who you want to work with, because you don't need to take every job that comes your way. You can say no, and more work will always come, and you just start to build a bit of an integrity for yourself. So I just try to look to see, I guess that's not three solid things. I look for integrity in the person that I'm working with. I look to see how they represent themselves publicly and what they stand for, and if it aligns with me. And yeah, just if I'm moved by the work that they're doing, then I will want to be a part of it. But when you're a bit younger, it's okay to work with a plethora of different people just to gain some experience. You don't have to, you can say yes until you're able to say no and start picking and choosing who you want to work with more,
Julia, what about you?
Oh, my top three. Number one, if you're approaching me, be ready, like, for example, like the setting. So, I mean, I don't want to have a drink with you, and I don't, and usually if I'm in a location or something, I'm either working with one of my bands, or maybe I'm producing. I also have an events company producing like an award show or doing something. So, like, kind of get to the point. I'll give you my card. And the other thing is, when you do respond, please be professional. So have your assets in order. So that's like, what do your socials look like? If there's a song you'd like me to hear, all this stuff. So that you kind of have almost like a resume, but kind of a rock and roll one. So I can sit there and take a look. And if you do give me something hard copy, contact information. It doesn't matter what it looks like, that there's a clear contact to get back to me, and just do your research, because sometimes I get people that come up to me and I can't help them with things. So just maybe like look up the bio, but usually it's at panels and things. And the other thing is that's really important. We're all very busy and we all work very, very long hours. I will always respond to the email, but I might not get to things, and I'll let you know that that I've seen it, and I'll tell you, like, I'll get to this next week. Do not call people like every day and everything. I need to know, where am I going, whatever. Of course, if you haven't heard from a few days, I don't mind a little prompt, but don't blow up my phone and email. It gets intrusive, and I'm gonna get to it. I just need a second to look at things. Yeah.
Jane, what about you?
Well, I would say that I definitely echo that same sentiment that, a big no-no is to send me multiple messages. As a busy person, it's very important as an artist approaching someone that's busy in this industry that you're concise, that you know exactly what your spiel is, why you're approaching that person. Do a bit of research about me and what I do. If you're just sort of looking for general information, maybe that's not a great idea. If you're wanting to get a song licensed, then know what licensing is and how that works. Have as much research done as you can when you approach someone professional, so they don't have to do any work on your part. Have your assets together, just like Julia was saying. Make sure it's really easy. If I do manage to click on that link that you've sent to my DM of my Insta, that I can just quickly click on it, and there is probably a video at this stage. It's going to be your smartest move. It's going to give me the most information about your brand, your appearance, your authenticity. And then ultimately just having some clarity. If it's something specific, like you want to make a record, and I do respond and I say, great, what genre is it? What's your timeline? Just respond with those answers, and I'm much more likely to be able to lock the work in and engage with you. And if we need to go on a thread, email back and forwards. I think the challenge in the music industry is everyone is often working for very little money, especially at times like this during COVID. So if you're going to climb the ladder and approach someone that has more experience than you, respect the fact that they're really busy and they may be doing you a favor by responding to you in those initial times. It's unlikely that I'm going to manage to discover someone at a show right now because there's no shows. So consider the new approach. How many messages come in every day? For an example, Arrival Sounds, which doesn't accept unsolicited materials, which when I was an independent artist, I was like, oh, that's so mean. You mean I can't send my demo tape to this label that I really want to get represented by? People ignore that. We get nearly 200 submissions a month to Arrival Sounds, of which we try to eventually listen to. But ultimately, if you find a way to engage in an interesting way in a single paragraph that captures my attention, that's really creative, it's much more likely to succeed than if you send me a novel to the email where I've said I don't accept unsolicited materials.
Bronwin, what about you?
Well, I work with a lot of different artists in a lot of different genres, and I really don't. It's gonna sound like kind of a jerky thing, but the first thing I want to know is that you're prepared. So sort of like both Jane and Julia were saying, be professional and be prepared to have the conversation about what you need. Like, what are you looking to produce? Like a digital media campaign, a video, an animated album cover, an album package, vinyl, etc. Like, know your wish list of stuff. And then 2, what is your timeline? If you tell me as soon as possible, you are officially at the bottom of the list, because everybody needs it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Like everybody wants it tomorrow and nobody gets it tomorrow. So I want to know, like, what is your actual timeline? When are you looking to release it by? Is there a specific event? Do you have a release party booked, et cetera, et cetera? And also take into consideration manufacturing, the lead time you need for the digital service providers, et cetera, et cetera. And then 3, which is the most important, is budget. Please do not call my studio and tell me you have $50. I love independent artists. I work with a lot of artists that are unsigned. I work with a lot of artists with like you don't need $1 million, okay, to do some giant Lady Gaga style photo shoot and album package. I can produce something excellent for you for, 4 figures. But for the love of God, if you call me, and I have been on phone calls where artists have requested major packages and branding. And when I ask them that, they say, well, I don't have a lot of money, but I guess I could squeeze $100. And I'm sorry, but that will not fly.
We need to eat.
That they're like, you're calling a professional, and these services like they have a price tag with them. So just because it's a service, we are still providing a product, whether it's creative services or like what Jane does, or even what Julia or the rest of the ladies up here do. Like, it's really important that when you're calling professionals to collaborate, that you know when you need it, what you need, and how much money you have. And because otherwise, unfortunately, like I don't have time for that. There are people, there are OCAD and Emily Carr University crank out like 250 or 400 designers a year. Like, call up those kids. But really, like, know where, like, what you're looking to create, because that is the only way we're going to be able to get this process started. But also, don't be afraid to call at the same time, if that kind of makes sense.
And Terry, what are the 3 things that you look for when an artist approaches you?
Well, I have not had an artist approach me in a long time, mainly because I have my own business, and my business is so diverse. And I've been fortunate enough in my lifetime to be able to pick and choose projects I want to work on. I think these ladies just gave excellent advice, all of them. Take that all into consideration. I do think that in approaching somebody, especially, overloading them and expecting them to give you expecting anybody to give you full attention. We're all working females and or even working males. I mean, if they're approaching a male, it doesn't matter. If you're approaching somebody, have respect that they're busy and don't overload them. But the advice that they just got is what I would give anybody. Earlier I was telling you about a performance guy that I know here. His name is Larry Butler, and he worked for 20 years at Warner Brothers Records, and he was in the artist relations department. He wrote a book, and I think everybody that's trying to get in the business should maybe read it. It's really to the point. It's called The New Singer-Songwriter Rule Book, or 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. And it covers almost everything that we're talking about. It's on Amazon. You can Kindle load it and everything. I only say that because I think it's hard to take in everything that was said here. But if you go read these things, they're pretty basic things about business that maybe you don't learn along the way, or you don't know what to expect when you get into the music business, because really all you see of the music business before you get into it is glitz and glamour and limousines and parties. It's not that. It's hard work, and it's particularly for I think people that get in and think about having a career in music, and if they want to be an artist, have to realize how lonely the road is. I mean, the road is not a fun place. It's a fun place for about 2 hours a day, and the rest of the time you're bored and you're away from your family and you're away from your friends. And I think you have to take in consideration if that's really the kind of lifestyle you want. Now, as you grow more popular, you can control that a little better, but mainly it's hard. It's hard work. And if you really believe in your art, that's what you're going to want to do. If you want to do this because you want to be a star, and you know, I hate to say this, I was the original producer on Star Search, and never thought that this was actually going to grow into what it's grown into. It's very tough for me to watch The Voice or all of these talented people, America's Got Talent, you know, and now it's around the world. England's Got Talent, Australia's Got Talent. To watch all these kids get on there, and then they get up to the top 10, and then they don't win. Now, I can't tell you, and I watched American Idol particularly, which was a knockoff of Star Search. I can't tell you any of the real talent. Maybe out of the 14 years that that's been in existence, there's maybe been 3 people that I can tell you were there, that have gotten on with their careers. Carrie Underwood, Kelly Clarkson, Phil, you know, there's several of them. But think about there's at least 20 people a year on there that get exposed to the masses, and then they try to have a career after that. I had the head of a record label here say to me, if one more artist comes off of a television show and says, you know, they had all these viewers and all these people, and yes, they get all of that, but it's so momentary. It's not about the art. It's not about everything we've discussed here. So be careful of what you wish for.
So I have one question that I love asking people.
Yeah,
just
I wanted
because...
to add one thing. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, go for it.
The last one, and I don't know if you ladies agree with this, is if we've met at a panel, I do a lot of speaking and a lot of panels and things like that, and you've met me once or twice, don't hit me up in my DMs. I think that's one of the biggest pet peeves I have, is someone either, you know, Instagram especially, don't go into a professional's, like, if you get a follow back, that's fine, but don't talk about business over social media. And also, you know, don't email me that you've sent me a Facebook request, because we're not friends. We're, you know, we're business women. And you know, just because you send me a friend request, you'll get my business card, but don't then. It's happened over and over where they're just like, well, I send you a friend request, but I haven't heard from you. We're not friends. And it's very tacky. So don't do it if you're emerging. Like, you're not friends. I think if you start developing a relationship, you start working together, and it becomes something that do that. But if you've met someone for about 15 minutes and ask their advice because you're doing a Music Ontario panel or something like that, doesn't mean you can do that. And if you do follow, like, my Instagram isn't private, don't DM me, please. So that's a big one for me. Keep it professional. Send your emails and your assets like that, but you know, don't bother people on social media if you want to look professional.
And even worse, don't DM a link to listen to your album.
Exactly.
Please.
Unless I request it, and I'm like, today I was on a plane and email wasn't or something. If I requested it, I go, yeah, please send it. You have that relationship, then do that. But until you do actually develop a relationship with someone in the music industry, don't assume that they're going to follow you back or do all those things. And if they don't, and you have their business card, please don't send an email saying like, oh, just so you know, I'll look at your stuff and stuff like that, but it doesn't necessarily. And if you get a follow, just stay out of the DMs if it's business. That's all.
So this actually is a perfect transition into my next little thing. I love to ask people this question, and I think some of the answers are hilarious sometimes, and we've already kind of covered this ground, but industry-wide, your biggest pet peeve for the music industry, just going around, all global. Like,
I think I just told you guys mine. So.
the biggest thing that bothers you in the industry. I'll start with mine. It drives me up the wall when I hear artists say, I just want to get my music out there. Like, what is out there? Is it out the window? Is it like down the street? Is it on iTunes? Is it, in your mom's car? what is out there? So that's my big thing. I'm wondering what yours is. And Jane, why don't we start with you? Do you have a pet peeve that's coming to mind?
I got heaps of them, but ultimately, well, this is an interesting one because I'm going to come at it from more of an artist's perspective, but also from a presenter perspective and a professional perspective. If you give your stuff away for free endlessly, then you are devaluing music overall. So when someone gives you an opportunity for exposure and they give you another opportunity for exposure, I'm 38. People are still trying to expose the music that I'm producing. I'm pretty exposed by now. This is dangerous. People may take advantage of you time and time again. Once you achieve a certain level of professionalism, know what your rate is. If someone says, oh my goodness, that's absurd, then they're not ready to work with you, respect you, and meet you in that regard. It can be difficult when you're at the beginning of your career, and I think that's different when you haven't had many live performances yet and you're still trying to develop contacts and connect. But say in music licensing industry at the moment, it's all of the bands that give their music away for free that stop people from being able to get paid to have their music synced in film and television now. So once you've cultivated a brand and you have a value to what you have, know how you can uphold the rates that you're creating and support other artists in being paid for their art by valuing it enough to have a price tag on it rather than just responding to endless exposure opportunities.
Exposure kills.
Exposure.
Terry, what about you? What's your biggest industry pet peeve?
Well, I come from a whole different place than you ladies do, and for me, it's seeing how corporate has so taken over the industry, and that good talent, it's really hard. I mean, I live in a town where there's 10,000 songwriters, and one is as good as the next. I shouldn't say all, but it's very, very difficult if you don't have a lot of money or you aren't signed by a label to break through. And I think that's really hard for me. I don't think there's too many. I mean, and now these talent shows are producing people that maybe don't have as much talent as other people out there. I don't think the balance of I don't think it's fair anymore. I think when it was my frontier back in the 60s, it was fair because there wasn't this just overwhelming amount of people that want to be in this business. And for me, that's hard for me to see because I like to nurture and I like to mentor. I like to do all of those things. And it's difficult to give anybody a whole lot of encouragement unless they have a whole lot of drive and passion. And it's if I have a pet peeve, that's it, because the record companies are no longer 5 people making decisions. They're now 125 people, and everybody has a vote, or and that doesn't mean everybody's going to agree on that talent. And radio is now consolidated so that you can't just hardly get a grassroots hits anymore that'll drive it. It all takes way too much money, and that's a pet peeve of mine. I don't think talent should be hurt by that.
Carleigh, what about you?
Unmute.
I think you muted.
Oh, there we go. Here I am. I think when I was younger, it used to be that, the techs and the crew, when I would show up, would think I was just like the girlfriend of one of the band members or was sleeping with somebody. And that would upset me. And then I'd be like, wait till you hear me sing. And then I'd, prove them wrong. But lots of pet peeves have evolved from there. I think recently it's been bothering me just with COVID and, seeing those like lists of like, I don't know who they're serving, but like, what do you feel is an essential, service, or what would you like to see come back first? There was one that was like cleaners. Like it was clearly like from a very privileged position of like, this is what I'd like to see come back. I'd like my, cleaning service to come back and clean my house for me. And then on the top of the other side was like, most non-essential was like telemarketers, artists, and it's like it's just the devaluation of art that you see now, that's like, because, and I think it's because of streaming accessibility and all of that stuff, of course, but it's like people don't even understand how essential, like, especially in a time of COVID, what are you doing when you're at home watching Netflix? That's art, that's film that was made by hundreds of artists. You're listening to music, you're streaming all these things to entertain yourself, and like, how is that not essential? You're reading a book, you're gazing at a painting, like, and so it's, I just wish that people would understand. I think it's just something that people, it's so intrinsic and so essential that it's almost taken for granted. And like, I just got a text yesterday, someone, a friend of mine who I know respects artists, but was like, hey, do you have any non-royalty music I can use in my Facebook live stream? And I'm like, what does that mean? A non-royalty piece of music? Like, are you just saying, do I want to give you my music for free and you don't have to pay for it? Like, just call a spade. Um, that that shouldn't, that mentality is just, I think, what my biggest pet peeve is that the value of art is kind of, and I'm guilty of it too. I stream music all the time, I'm on Spotify. It's kind of a tool you use a lot as a musician. Exposure. But it's exposure, and I'm dying of it.
And lastly, Bronwin, what's your big pet peeve?
Like Jane, I have 1,000. Well, I already sort of spoke of one, is the earlier, which was your target demographic is the entire world. That's always the most annoying thing to hear as somebody who's trying to help brand you and create a visual identity for you as an artist. But I'd also like to say, like, it always frustrates me when an artist will spend like 25, 30, $70,000 on a recording, and they've really put their heart and soul into it, and like, it sounds amazing, and then it sounds sort of silly, but it's like, then they come to me and they're like, okay, well, I've got like $500. Like, okay, well, I hate to break it to you, but now you've just said that you want to take this like Mercedes of a record and like jam it into a 1990 Honda Civic. And that's, to me, silly. Like, if you're going to compete on the level with all these other artists, you have to like make sure that you're thinking about sort of how it looks and how you're going to present this record visually. Like, now especially, how you present your music in the visual medium is so important. So as much as you're getting in the studio, you also need to be talking to creative director, designer, photographer, et cetera, to make sure that that process is getting started early so that you can build it all together. Because that's also a pet peeve. Now I've got like 3 of them. Is that you don't have time for the art. Like, you've taken 9 months to record it and polish it and master it and make it the best possible music ever. But now I have to build this Mercedes in a week and a half. And that's just not going to produce a Mercedes. That will barely produce a Honda Civic. Like, I have seen some incredible music go out there looking like, just looking awful. And like, if I put them all up in front of you, you can tell which artist didn't take the time. And it doesn't necessarily correlate to the fact that the music is better. Like, I've produced beautiful artwork for records that maybe weren't the best, but like, I'm not gonna lie, folks. But then there's other records that are incredible, and they don't get the time of day because they don't perform well when all you see is that little thumbnail. Because right up against all these other artists, like, I'm sorry, but you are competing with the top level A-list. Like, yeah, I'm sorry, if you're a pop artist, you are competing with Beyonce and Billie Eilish and Lady Gaga. If you're a metal artist, you're 100% competing with like Slayer, Metallica, et cetera, et cetera. So like, you better put your best foot forward, and make sure that you're investing in as much, what, like, we are, as much as we're in audio, auditory medium. We're also very visual medium now. So you have to really consider how you present yourself as an artist. And that is almost as important. I say almost because not always, because Bob Dylan will prove me wrong every time. But so those are sort of my top three pet peeves of the industry.
Thank you so much, Bronwin. Now, because we're all about artists supporting artists, I actually just want to take a couple of minutes because we're reaching the end of our panel here. I want to give each of you guys like 2 minutes to talk about the projects that you're working on and where people can find access to the resources you've been talking about and the programs and the people that you've been working with. So I'm wondering if you're comfortable, if you wouldn't mind for 2 minutes telling us about the programs and the initiatives that you've started and been a part of and what you're working on now and where people can find it. So, Jane, why don't we start off with you and you can talk a little bit about the initiative you started and how people can get involved.
I believe you're referring to Producers Lounge, probably, which is a recent initiative that I began last year in Vancouver to support women and non-binary music producers, not necessarily having to be producers that have like a huge catalog of working with other artists, but also self-produced artists and people wanting to build their technical capacity to work and or communicate in studio environments. So it was started to function in Studios Vancouver, and there were 100 applicants. It was for above high school level folks to apply initially, but now in times of COVID and because of a growing need in the world, we're probably going to be broadcasting a lot of the program online later in the year, starting in September. Some of the guests that we hosted last year are Wendy and Lisa from Prince's band, The Revolution, Sylvia Massey also, who I mentioned, who's also worked with Prince, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Tool, so with pretty world-class mentorship from women and non-binary folks, mostly within BC in the early stages of what we were doing. But things have gone pretty well, and we're going to be putting out a podcast, which will be available to everyone via Spotify. And if you're interested to engage with it, even though you won't be able to attend some of the BC-based conferences for the smaller group, we are going to be broadcasting some of our events and forums later in the year online for anyone to tune into in a Zoom meeting like this. So you'll be able to hear some of the best female and non-binary producers in the world speaking about their process, and there'll be Q&A and so on. And the way to get in touch with that is, rather than sending a private message, is to follow at Producers Lounge Vancouver is the Insta tag, and that's where we post about all upcoming events and so on. It's on pause because of COVID. We were going to be holding it at a bunch of studios throughout summer, and we're just pivoting in order to present it in an appropriate online format. But if this sounds cool to you and you want to see other examples of women and non-binary folks that are producing music at a high level, it's a great place where you can go to check that out. You can even scroll through everything we've done to date on the Instagram and see what's been going on. And come September, there'll be announcements about everything that's going to be going on online. And for the public events, you'll be able to log in and tune in. It's going to be free. So please join, please follow us, and then you'll be able to find out what's happening next.
Thank you so much, Jane. And Julia, I would love for you to speak about your initiative as well.
Okay, so currently I'm with Gypsy Soul Records. We have an album coming out with Samantha Martin and Delta Sugar, The Reckless One. So we're working on that release, which will be working on radio campaigns and things like that. Also, we're working with an artist she's not signed to the label, but we're doing some radio campaigning for Sid West Carter out of BC. So other than that, just label stuff with different artists, but you can check us out at www.gypsysoulrecords.com. Also, I have another meeting on Thursday with Women in Music Canada. So we're gearing up to expand the board. We want it to be diverse and more inclusive. So we're right now just meeting every other week because we can to figure out and start getting women to nominate. And that's, I'm going to kind of segue into something, is that, also if you're working in the industry or you want to be a part, always apply to be a board of director. if you have any experience and things like that. So we're looking to expand the board, create some committees, and also create chapters throughout Canada. So it's a federally recognized organization for women in music, Canada. For Canada. So, it's been a couple of years, but again, to get bylaws together and things like that. So we've just been putting that back together. Um, so much is on hold, but I also work for an events company that I co-own with my business partner that's been kind of walking back and forth here. And so we work for CMW. We produce award shows like in the Indie 88 Awards, and also the Canadian Independent Music Association's Gala, and other various shows throughout Canadian Music Week. So yeah, so it was just kind of sitting on there, but also keeping in touch with everyone and seeing what we can do. But that's just what I'm doing. But the other thing is, I really want to tell everyone out there, if you are starting out, you are in kind of and you want to get involved, and like I said, you need to educate yourself, is the Canadian Independent Music Association. Memberships are really great, but the thing is, they'll get you discounts so you can actually go to festivals and apply to be part of the Canada Blast, which takes artists all over the world so they can meet buyers and things like that. And also just educates you about advocacy. And finally, I think me and Tori were talking about this, or me and Valerie, or is know your rights. If you're making music, please sign up with SOCAN. I know it might be a little, it's boring, it's administrative, but you are running a business. It's just like, I think what we were talking about, if someone's doing, the farmer's growing corn, you're not just allowed to go and pick it because you want to. This is their business. This is how they make a livelihood. And you have to make sure that you professionalize yourself. Check out the CFM, that's the Canadian Federation of Musicians. That's your union. There's neighboring rights. Well, maybe we can do a full talk about that, about your recordings, to make sure they're done. Make sure you're contacting, and even if you talk to SOCAN about who else you need to talk to, you need to protect your music. You need to treat yourself as a business. It's great. It's a fun business, but it's also a profession. So that's my 2 minutes.
Thank you, Julia. Carleigh, can you talk a little bit about what you've been working on as well?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm really grateful to be awarded a big Canada Council grant this past year, and so I've had the opportunity to be working on my first it's not my first record for sure, but it will be the first one under my own name, which is really exciting. But that's still in the works, so none of it's been released yet, and we've just there's been a bit of a delay because there's a little bit of a pandemic happening, and that pushes everything back, but still working away on that. And you can follow me at my website is carleighaikins.com. My name's spelled kind of funny, Carleighaikins.com. And also my artworks are there. I'm also a visual artist and a painter, so that's what also keeps my creative soul going. So if you want to check out my work, which I do commissions and sell prints and all of that stuff. So, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to finally sharing, my own. This is me. I've been working with a great team of people, and I'm really excited to share it. So, but that exact date of when that will be shared is TBA right now, but it's coming soon. I'm excited. But thanks for having me, and it's been an honor to talk with all these women who are such badasses. Thanks for having me.
That's really exciting, Carleigh, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, sweetie.
Bronwin, can you tell us about the project that you have been working on?
Well, I'm always working on a bunch of different stuff. It's sort of tough to talk about, but it's been definitely an interesting shift of the type of material that we're putting out of the studio right now. We're doing a lot more video content, a lot more animated work, as well as obviously people are looking to get their online stores, and doing more sort of influencer targeted creative campaigns and that type of stuff. So it's kind of exciting how we've been able to sort of pivot the studio with me and my collaborators to sort of, try and make it happen in this brave new world. So uh, but last year, I sort of unofficially soft launched the Breaking Glass project, which was an aim to increase the number of women and non binary individuals within the trades and tech fields in the music industry. Because, like I said earlier, I'm very lucky as a designer. It's considered a bit of a soft trade, so it's okay for a girl to be good at it and to be seen as an authority. But like we've brought up a few times here, there are other fields where it's, there are very few women, and the women that are there deal with a lot of discrimination and a lot of sort of harassment and or people just undermining their authority as sound women, lighting women, record producers, songwriters, and the list is very long. So I sort of launched the Breaking Glass project to help encourage the artists who are coming to work with my studio. I don't really have a lot of input on what they do before they get to me. Often record producers are already selected, songs are already written, this and that and the other thing. But I try and be very public about, like, maybe take into consideration, like, don't just default to, I just don't know any. I'm like, well, that's sort of lame. um it's like they're out there, and yeah, maybe it's not just, they're not just standing around the corner. Maybe you do have to do a little bit of digging for it, but it's worth it, because, as you know, the guys got lots of work and they'll let you know for sure how busy they are, and so do the girls. But sometimes it's really nice to have a new perspective, like Jane was saying, on your music. And more, there are female producers that are getting some notoriety, which is fantastic to see, but it's still slow going. So, as much as I can, I'm trying to champion it from my end and just like bring it up with clients all the time. And maybe, it can't be this record because it's already locked, but maybe they'll think about it for the next record. So, a lot of it is just having these sort of kind of uncomfortable conversations with my clients to help sort of, get people thinking about it, and also thinking about who they hire for their tours, what type of sound crew they take on tour, what type of musicians they hire for their solo artists, that type of thing. And so that's something I'm always sort of working on. And most recently, my studio enacted a reparations and amplification policy where we've selected a rotating list of 5 charities that will be donating 5% of our studio fees to various charities that benefit the Indigenous, Black communities and communities of people of color. Just because we have to recognize our own privilege. We are, as talented as my team is, I do have to fully recognize and take responsibility for the fact that we are not a very diverse team. And so we are working to correct that moving forward. And, the first place it starts is with me. So I figured I'd put my money where my mouth is. And you can take a look at my studio at feistycreative.com. Please note the spelling. It's E before I. And you can also check me out on Instagram at Feisty Creative, or Facebook if you are over the age of 30. And yeah, you can check me out there. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Bronwin. And lastly, Terry, can you tell us a little bit about what you and your artist have going on right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not only that, I manage Jesse Lavelle, and he is Canadian. He's from Toronto. I've worked with tons of people from Toronto. I, in the 60s, toured with a band called the Mandela, which had Dominic Troiano and Whitey Glenn and Roy Kenner, all of whom ended up in big rock and roll bands. And I worked with Bruce Allen. We did a Michael Bublé project together for Hallmark out of Vancouver, and his whole staff, the Bat Girls, who I love dearly. When I'm working with Jesse, he came down here to write music, and he came down here to break the American market. And I had records up in Canada, and I think more in the pop vein at that time. He wanted to learn the songwriting craft, which was very interesting. He spent 4 years here before I met with him. So I'm trying to knock doors down for him a little bit and see what he can get out there. That's how I'm familiar with so much of what's going on in in the new business world. 10 years ago, if I'd met him, he would have been on a label. It would have been easy. It's not easy now. And I think that I like the challenge. I also work on many other types of projects. I'm working with I work with the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame because I'm partial to songwriters, and I do a lot of their sponsorships and work on a gala that they are not having this year, and it's their 50th anniversary, which is really sad. But again, we'll live to see another year, I'm sure, and we'll probably combine all of that together. I love the organization. I work with NSAI, which is also a organization here that was involved with the National Songwriters Hall of Fame. They parted company about 12 years ago because NSAI not only became helpful to all young new songwriters who came into town, but also is lobbying in Congress for better royalties, which is huge. My father was a music publisher, and I've always respected the songwriter and their rights and their creation. And I think that commerce is being built around songwriters and artists and their work, and these millions of dollars that they're spending on offices, and they can't pay the songwriters or the artists enough money. And to me, it's a real battle. And I try to help as much as I can with that because I really respect the Canadian government and what they do to help all of you up there in terms of arts, and they respect the arts. It's not so down here. It's more about every man for himself. So I work on those projects. I'm working diversely. I'm a marketer as well, and I'm working with a new rideshare company that's coming up called Trip. And the reason I'm working with them is because between Uber and Lyft, the drivers don't seem to be getting a lot of the money or the rides or the tips, and this one is a whole different format. The drivers receive all the money and all the tips, and it's put on and puts all of them into an entrepreneurial position where they can build their own business, which I'm very, very fond of. And we're launching probably in the next 10 days in 5 cities here in America, and we'll be up there sometime soon. But pretty much I'm working with a friend who has a camp that she does every year called Camp Broadway. Again, the pandemic kind of put that away, but it's across the United States, and it encourages kids to go to camp and who want to perform on Broadway, which is a whole other unique musical experience here. So basically that's all. I'm not real busy right now, but I keep myself busy. I'm winding down my career. You girls are all starting your career into that. I think you've got unbelievable mindsets and the way you're approaching things. Certainly we were more like by the seat of our pants when we were doing this earlier on. Tori, thank you so much too for all of that. Having me on this panel. I've learned probably as much as anybody, so thank you.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you to all of you amazing ladies for joining us today. I am so incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to interact with all of you, and I'm really excited about the future moving forward in the music industry with ladies. It's going to be sick. So thank you all very much for your time today, and thank you to everybody who's watching online, who has been sending us comments and asking questions and starting a conversation, a really important conversation. So thank you very much for your time today. We have another broadcast next Tuesday, from 6 to 8 as well, so make sure you tune in for that. Thank you very much. This is the Ontario Musicians Co-operative. If you're interested in learning about your rights as an artist, please check us out at ontariomusicians.com, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for
Bye.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. This is